Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel, Cynicalex, and I am back with even more Null tips because I know there are players out there who still can't beat Null despite feeling as though they have the roster for him. So I've played Null, I've studied him even harder than before, harder than I've ever studied for a test in my life, and I've noticed even more about the fight. So I want to bring you those tips, I want to show you those mechanics and really explain them in depth because they could be the difference between you winning and losing. And even one win a day, if I can get you one win a day, that's so clutch. That's 15, minimum 15 CCF a day. That could honestly get you an extra 800 CCF a month or more. It's about 800 on average. It's a minimum 450 or whatever, maximum of like 1200. But yeah, it's a lot of CCF. So this video is for you. Also, I'm going to show you guys with different characters, but at first I want to cover just a couple of really basic sort of baseline foundational stats that you want to aim to have for Null, because I know some people out there, they send me screenshots of their roster, or they say, you know, I've got tier 3 Sharon Rogers, I've got tier 3 Ghost Rider with a Rage, but I just cannot do any damage to Null. I don't know what's going on. So it may seem very basic to you, but as far as the build goes, you absolutely must have that ignore defense stat yellow. If it's not yellow, if it's not capped at 50% or over, then you're doing something wrong. You have to fix the build. The cooldown should also be 50% or as close as possible. As you can see, I'm 47.5, but it really needs to be above 45%. The rest of the build, obviously, you have to give Uru. This goes without saying. You have to give an offensive ISO 8 set, Power of Angry Hulk, Overdrive, or Hawk's Eye. Has to be at least stage 6 or higher. You want those chaotics to also have, you know, attack stats on them. Don't give chaotics that have, you know, crit damage, like this one, crit rate, physical damage, physical defense. Like, that's not helpful, right? So you want attack and then HP or dodge on the ISOs. Obviously, if you don't have a CTP, you need a damage proc obelisk. And then as far as the cards go, with my cards, without any pierce, I can push stage 9 with 3 different teams: Null, Odin, and Ghost Rider. So even if you're just doing stage 2 or stage 1, you can do it with cards that are less than half as good as mine. So don't see my cards as what you need to have. This is a luxury because I'm way past stage 1 and 2. I'm way past that point. So if you're just aiming for stage 1 and 2, which plenty of players can do already, you really only need to aim for, honestly, like half of my attack stats. You really only need about 25 to 30% all attack, and then you really don't need more than 5 to 10% of the physical and energy attack. I've seen players with worse stats than that, less than 40% combined physical, energy, and all attack, and they can do Null. You just have to have enough ignore defense, you have to have enough cooldown, and then you have to play well. As far as playing well goes, obviously there's skill rotations and there's guides and you have to practice. I practice with every character that I use, kind of goes without saying, but you know, it definitely makes a difference if you practice versus not practicing. And you know what? Even if you can't beat Null, beat your 5 world bosses of the day on anyone else, and then go and play Null in training mode. Obviously, if you haven't unlocked Null, it's a different story, but you know, it goes without saying. So now I'm gonna jump in and show you guys the new mechanics that I've noticed and how they can really destroy certain characters, and how it actually makes other characters, specifically Odin, way better for this fight than we thought. Odin's really good for a lot of reasons, you know, huge damage, accumulation, and he's got 100% ignore dodge. But there's one passive that Odin has, if you can guess what it is, that makes him absurdly good for this fight. There's actually a passive that Odin has, and that's not that one, that makes him, you know, way better than someone like Carnage. So I'm going to jump into the fight now. We're going to fast forward to the part where it happens, and I'm going to show you why you're losing damage with certain characters. All right, so we're in the second phase of the Null fight. I'm going to pump out a few buffs here against Null. I'm not trying to do a ton of damage, so I'm going to cancel these skills. But what I want you to pay attention to, I want you to pay attention to 2 things. Up at the top left corner, my Carnage has a ton of buffs right now. He's got 5 seconds on accumulation. He's got 5 seconds on a couple of other buffs, 7 seconds on invincibility, and then he's got 7 seconds on his penetration. Okay? Then I want you to pay attention to, I know your eyes can't be in 2 places at once, but look at Null. He's about to do an attack where he spreads these sort of symbiote tentacles out in a circle around him. It's the same thing that he does at the end of his first skill in the skill preview, and I'll show you guys in a second, okay? So watch Null hit me with this skill. Right after this attack here, we're gonna do a couple more buffs here, right here. There we go. So he just hit me with that like spread out attack. Look at all of Carnage's buffs. They're all gone. That's right. When he does this move, and he does this move right before he will do the spiky attack. When he does that move, he strips you of all your buffs. Why is that important? Well, most characters rely on their accumulation buff, their ignore defense, their ignore dodge buff, their attack buffs in order to deal damage to Null. Now watch what happens when Odin gets hit by that attack. So really quickly, this is the attack in question that I'm talking about. He's basically gonna do his first skill. He's gonna slam the ground and then he's gonna do that roar. That roar right there where all the tentacles spread out, all the symbiote tentacles shoot out, that is the animation where he strips you of all your buffs. Okay, so we're back here with the same fight, but we're gonna be using Odin here. Now I want you to pay attention to what happens when Odin gets hit by this attack. So you can see here we've got a bunch of buffs. We've got a 7-second buff, 7 seconds on the accumulation, 3 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, 12 seconds on a summon buff, and then our immunity is about to expire. So watch what happens. He's gonna hit us, he's gonna roar. Where's the roar? There's the roar. And you can see there, I've paused it, but two things happened. I lost most of my buffs because they ran out, but you can see there I still have a 4-second buff active, so he did not take my buffs. What was more important there is that you saw the word cancel immunity come up several times in orange text. That cancel immunity makes Odin very, very good for Null, and it actually also makes Odin very, very good against the Purify. There's a purifying wind special skill. It's those spears, and those spears will also remove all of your buffs. There's only one character in the game that doesn't work on, and that's Odin, because the All God passive gives him immunity to cancel effect. And what cancel means, it means it's any skill from a boss, from an environment, from an enemy that will remove your buffs. He is immune to that removal effect, which is amazingly, amazingly good. For Null, for the Purifying Wind, it means that Thanos' first skill and Doctor Strange's first skill can't take away his buffs. It's a super underrated passive for him, and it makes him tremendously good for PvE content because it means you can just endlessly face tank without having to worry about having any of your buffs removed, let alone all of your buffs, right? Because Null, when he hits you with that attack, all your offensive buffs and all your defensive buffs go goodbye. If you had a heal up, your heal is gone. It's a super crippling move, and Odin is just straight up 100% immune to it. He's just like, nah, bro, try again. So it makes sense now why Odin is even better for Null than we originally thought. Now, one thing to note about this attack that will remove your buffs is that if you have buffs up and you have immunity, your buffs will not be removed. So I'm going to show you here with Sharon Rogers. I'm going to use her immunity skill, and he's going to use his roar. And as you can see, I still have all of my buffs up. I have a 5-second buff, a 3-second buff, a 7-second buff. I have my 7 seconds of accumulation, which is super important for Sharon. And then I have 2 seconds left on my immunity. Now, this is a perfect example of why damage immunity is really good in some cases, and then invincibility is really good in other cases. What happens to Sharon? What would have happened to Sharon Rogers if I had put up the immunity skill, he had done that roar, and she didn't have, I mean, she does, but if she didn't have super armor, she would have been guard broken. And that's the disadvantage of immunity, right? The immunity on her third skill gives her the immunity from having her buffs removed, but if you don't have super armor, then you get guard broken. So a perfect example of that would be Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange, if you have his 5th skill up, Vishanti Destruction, then he'll have the immunity and he won't get his buffs removed. And Doctor Strange has some pretty good buffs, as you can see, 80% all attack and defense. You don't want those buffs removed, but Doctor Strange doesn't have super armor. He does get super armor when you use his 6th skill, his ultimate ability, because it gives him 10 seconds of invincibility, and you can have invincibility and immunity up. But that's sort of the trade-off between the two. They sort of seem like they do the exact same thing. Immunity doesn't allow your buffs to be removed. I mean, there are certain situations, but again, against Null, against this kind of stuff, world boss stuff, PvE stuff, immunity is really good for protecting your buffs, but it doesn't protect you from being interrupted, from having your attacks interrupted by guard break. If you have super armor or guard break immunity, or you have invincibility up, because invincibility gives you super armor, then you don't have to worry about getting guard broken or interrupted when Null does that attack. But if you only have invincibility up and he does that attack to remove your buffs, to strip your buffs, then you'll lose all your buffs. So you really have to take it on a character by character basis. A couple of more characters I can name off the top of my head, like for example, Professor X. He does have, I believe, a very short immunity, or he has invincibility. So he has invincibility here for 5 seconds, but he also has a buff, right? So this would be a bad character to, it would be a bad time to use Professor X's 5th skill when Null is about to do that, because he'll take away your invincibility, he might remove your heal, and he's going to remove all those other buffs. He's going to remove your attack buffs, he's going to remove your accumulation buffs, because Professor X doesn't have immunity on his 5th skill. And you know what? I don't think Professor X has immunity on any of his skills. So Professor X is going to struggle a little bit more because he has no way to protect himself from getting those buffs removed. Another example would be Cyclops. He can protect his buffs from being removed by using his 5th skill because it gives him immunity, but because he doesn't have guard break or super armor, then he's just going to get guard broken by that attack instead. But he does have invincibility on his ultimate. Most characters have invincibility on their ultimate, but not immunity. So you sort of have to weigh the pros and cons, but it would be a horrible idea to be midway through your tier 3 animation, because tier 3 skills also have a ton of buffs. So picture, for example, Sentry here. He pops this skill, it has invincibility. Null does the roar, strips him of all his buffs. Now your Sentry's doing garbage damage. So there are some characters like Sharon Rogers that are designed really well to be able to tank that and continue, where she has super armor and she has immunity, but it's a very, very rare combination. So you have to sort of understand the character in depth before going into it. Otherwise, you're going to get guard broken, or you're going to have your buffs removed, or potentially both. The second tip that I wanted to give you guys involves characters and their tier 3 skills. So I wanted to use my good pal Thor to showcase this one. And this has to do with the Null cage in the first phase of the fight. Now, a couple of people have hit me up about this, saying that, you know, you can dodge the cage by just doing your tier 3 skill. So I'm going to basically show you what this means with some characters. So you can see here, I didn't switching is one way to dodge the cage. I didn't use the co-op skill to dodge the cage. Okay, fine. So I kind of screwed that up. There is another way. There is another. So if you have your tier 3 skill ready to go when he's about to do the second cage, Null will do 2 cages. He does one cage at 55 bars, and he does another cage at 45 bars. And he always prompts you with that text. He'll say, like, you know, I've had enough of this, or I don't know what he says. You cannot escape me. So here's what you do. You basically, when the symbiote goo splashes on the ground before the cage shows up, you pop your tier 3 skill. Now, I haven't exhaustively tested every single tier 3 skill to know that this works. I've mentioned it anecdotally in a few videos about Doctor Strange and Namor, so I know off the top of my head Doctor Strange and Namor can do this. I know as well that Carnage and Thor can also do this, because I've noticed it recently. So basically, I'm not saying you should hold your tier 3 for the entire first half of the fight. Obviously, you have to gauge how much damage you're going to get. But what I am saying is, if you're charging up your tier 3 and it gets to be full, it's ready to press when you're at, you know, 56 bars or 46 bars or 47 bars even, there's a pretty decent chance that you're going to be able to pump out more damage and not get stunned if you just hold your tier 3 a little bit. So he gives you the little blurb there, and then he's going to splash the ground, and then I'm just going to pop my tier 3. And you can see there, it was very, very brief, but there was some white text that popped up, and it said stun immunity. That stun immunity text is what stops you from getting stunned in the cage, and now I can just continue on my journey. Let me show you one more example. Here we're going to start with Carnage to just build up his tier 3 right away, and we're going to see the stun immunity pop-up message on the very first cage. I showed you guys on the second cage, so now I want to show you guys on the first cage. So I'm going to do a bunch of damage here. There's no use in hiding, so we know that the symbiote goo is coming. Okay, there's the goo. I popped the tier 3, and you're going to see stun immunity, stun immunity. It popped up twice. And there you go. You've dodged the cage, and you can just continue to deal damage. Now, obviously, I'm probably not going to be able to build up my tier 3 again. Actually, you know what? I can. Oh, I can. Goo, pop the tier 3, stun immunity. Oh, so there you go. It wasn't the best rotation. Obviously, it's better for players that are using a CTP of Rage or something like that. But you're able to dodge. You can dodge both of the Null cages in the first phase by popping your tier 3 skill and or switching and or using the co-op skill. But definitely the tier 3, popping the tier 3 is the one that gives you the widest window of opportunity to dodge it. Now, again, I don't know if every character can do this. I haven't exhaustively tested it, so if there's someone out there who has the time and the patience to exhaustively test it with every single tier 3, I would greatly appreciate that information. But off the top of my head, I know for sure that Namor, Doctor Strange, Carnage, and Thor can do it, and I think maybe Null can do it as well. So yeah. Anywho, hopefully those tips have helped you out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.